how good was David Luiz actually? Luiz's career has been full of incredible ups and downs, to say the least. He always divided opinion among fans. During his high days, some loved his personality and character, while others were always terrified every time the ball went in his general direction. His last European stint at Arsenal almost stripped him of the high regard many fans held him. Was he always like this? At Benfica under Jorge Jesus, he was the vice-captain, playing a key role in the triumphant season when the club won their first league title in 5 years, featuring in almost all games. He made a name for himself, particularly with his trademark bursts forward from the heart of defense, showing true traits of a classy, accomplished midfielder with incredible passing and long balls. He was dubbed the next Lucio, a marauding, free-spirited warrior, always playing with a smile, and his signature curly hair meant it was hard to miss him anytime he was on the pitch. He had the technique of any lead midfielder with a deadly shoot in his boot. Despite Benfica improving week in, week out, it was clear the Brazilian was using the club as stepping stone. He was coveted by Europe's top boys, but Chelsea had an ace in the hole. They made an offer for £25 million plus Nemanja Matic, which was almost impossible for Benfica to turn down. It did the trick. The London club in the Premier League provided a chance to Luiz to solidify his fledgling reputation as one of the world's best defensive prospects. His first few games at Chelsea and subsequent goal against Manchester United were typical of the risk-taking nature that made him dangerous at either end. Despite his strong start, it wasn't smooth sailing, as the Brazilian's attacking tendencies would often leave a gap to exploit when he lost the ball further off the field, and risk-taking soon translated into being error-prone. When he was caught out of position, the notoriously slow John Terry was forced into foot races. He had no chance of winning. Even so, to many Chelsea faithful, he became a cult hero. His attitude towards the beautiful game, infused with a cheeky personality, was something to be admired, and he also represented an upcoming breed of modern-styled centre-back. He possessed great ability in the air, and despite standing at 6'2", he showed confidence in his ability with the ball at his feet. It was no surprise that he was a key member of the team that triumphed in both of Chelsea's European wins, and was always one of the first names on the team sheet throughout his time at the club. Like the historic Champions League against Bayern, he returned from injury to play in the final and helped hold off Bayern Munich's dominant attacking unit. But despite the trophies and plaudits, it quickly began to fall apart for Luiz in England. The media consistently highlighted his flaws, or maybe the referees wised up to the worst of his antics. Who can forget that particular moment at Old Trafford in 2013? Gary Neville, in one of his more famous quotes on Sky Sports, likened Luiz's defending to that of a player controlled by a 10-year-old on the PlayStation. Well, that was a bit harsh, but that's the player many saw and came to know. One minute he was the best defender in the world, and the next he was committing embarrassing mistakes. For all his flaws though, Luiz was still coveted and lauded in many quarters for his natural talent. Better decision making would hopefully come in time, and he had the attributes to become one of the world's very best. With all the pressure, Luiz chose to leave the club altogether for PSG in 2014, when the French club decided to slap down £50 million for the defender's services. Most Chelsea fans were not too happy with the decision to let a key member of the team leave, but the transfer deal was too good. At the French capital, Luiz played alongside fellow countryman Thiago Silva, and he seemed to enjoy it. He loved the Paris-based club, and the club loved him back, but just like his time at Chelsea, he had moments to forget, including one during a Champions League clash against Barcelona when they had the famous MSN, Messi, Suarez and Neymar. Suarez at his peak was a nightmare, and on that day he destroyed Luiz with 2 nutmegs and also managed to score. PSG was beaten, and so was Luiz. Then came the 2014 World Cup. Hosted on home soil, Brazil was seen as one of the dark horses for the tournament, with Luiz named the vice-captain, and they had the home support throughout the campaign. They navigated through the group and saw off Colombia in the quarterfinals, with Luiz scoring the game-winning free kick. They were then matched up against Germany in the most memorable international game in recent history. It was a 7-1 demolition, and despite there being 10 other Brazilians on the pitch, if you ask anyone about this game, the image of Luiz crying springs to their mind. It was unfortunate, and for all his high moments, this was perhaps the lowest of his career. You could argue that his performance at the World Cup damaged his career in an almost unsalvageable way. After the World Cup, he slowly began to restore his reputation in the safety of Paris, and he surprisingly seemed to mature. Somehow, perhaps because he played alongside the experienced and always calm Silva. He no longer had to deal with the memes and constant criticism athleticism that had underpinned his time in England. No doubt it was a learning experience, and playing in a team packed with quality helped him so much. He eventually won 8 trophies during his time at the Paris-based club. He seemed to have some unfinished business at Chelsea though, and in 2016 he packed his bags again and made a shock return to Chelsea. As expected, the return of the famous Afro drew a mixed response from fans and the media, but this time he proved the doubters wrong. He perfectly fit into the Blues backline, commanding his role with more discipline than expected, using his talents to play dangerous passes from the safety of his own half. He formed part of a 3-man defense that was the foundation of the club's success, as they were crowned Premier League champions in 2017 under Antonio Conte. He also won the FA Cup in 2018 and the Europa League in 2019. The Brazilian had finally matured into one of the very best in the league, and he remained at the peak until one of his former teammates in Frank Lampard took over the bridge and things changed. Somehow he was forced out and he chose to remain in London at Arsenal, and this is when things started to go from fair to worse. Well, before leaving Chelsea, his game had started to deteriorate and it got even worse at Arsenal. No one would understand what was happening. He has always managed to bounce back from difficult moments, like the Suarez moment for instance, but his time at Arsenal was completely a different story. In his 3 seasons at Chelsea before he moved to Arsenal, he did not give away a single penalty, but in his first season at Arsenal, he conceded 4 penalties, twice as many as any other player, and many will remember that match against Manchester City, a horrendous performance from the Brazilian. In total, he conceded 6 penalties and got 3 red cards during his time with the Gunners. Luiz's qualities best suit a team that dominates in possession, and that's what Arsenal provided. But he failed to fit in, and the Gunners started to play the Arsenal way, partly thanks to the Brazilian. Despite his shortcomings, the defender was a big game player. You could argue that his best 2 games as a Gooner came in his 2 most important games. One of them was when Arsenal beat Chelsea in the FA Cup final. Despite the constant mockery from all quarters, you don't win every domestic title in 3 different countries and 2 Europa League trophies and a Champions League without being good at your job. Luiz made a living out of proving people wrong, and you get the feeling he enjoyed doing it. And after a 2-year stint at Arsenal, he returned to his home country where he currently plays for Flamengo as he sees out his career, away from the media that made and to some extent destroyed him. When all is said and done, technically Luiz was one of the best defenders in the Premier League. His ability has never been in question, nor his commitment to the cause. Instead, it's always been his mentality and temperament that has appeared to have been the problem, and it somehow held him back during his early stages of his troubled career. Perhaps unbeknownst to Gennaro Gattuso, he sums up the central defender best of all. An utter calamity one day and an elegant brick wall the next. What were your best David Luiz moments? Let us know in the comments.